Amazing revelation. Maid takes fortune to save dying child. Billionaire's response will inspire. Maria's alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m., shattering the stillness of the frosty Des Moines morning. With heavy eyes, she rose to face another day within the ornate halls of Richard Hayes's estate. Dust motes floated through beams of early light, reminders of the life and luxury that surrounded her, yet remained forever out of reach. Her younger brother, Nick, languished in a hospital room, and the latest call had brought with it devastating news. The only chance for his survival rested on an experimental treatment that would cost nearly $200,000. Her heart sank like an anchor as she stared at her barely there bank account. Panic set in, twisting her stomach like a knot. Would selling family heirlooms from her mother's side suffice? How could she ever fathom approaching a loan shark with their predatory rates? The thought sent chills down her spine. But what choice did she have? Every dollar counted, and she would do anything for Nick. The weight of their modest roots pressed heavily on her as if it were a physical burden dragging her down. The neighbors would never understand. Tales of this neighborhood filled with manicured lawns and gleaming cars masked the realities Maria faced every day. Unbeknownst to them, she was just one of the many sacrifices made in the name of familial love. As Maria scrubbed surfaces in the Hayes household, each swipe of the mop became a reminder of her uphill battle. Little moments of exhaustion compounded into waves of despair, each wave crashing louder than the last. Then came a surreal twist of fate. While diligently dusting Richard's extravagant bookshelf, she accidentally left her phone's call with a medical fundraising hotline on speaker. The anguish in her voice echoed through the lavish room, her pleading, her resolve, her quiet desperation. Richard, stepping through the door to check on his possessions, froze mid-step. An uncomfortable reality bit hard into his gut. Here stood Maria, a hard-working woman with a family she would do anything to save. He felt a swell of guilt that stemmed from every penny he had amassed, knowing that it all seemed irrelevant against the raw reality Maria exposed in that moment. Was he truly living when he had turned a blind eye to those less fortunate? Even as he stood draped in luxury, which he once believed defined his worth, he confronted his own internal turmoil, wrestling with an impulse to take responsibility. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As the afternoon sun spilled lazily into the living room, Maria became lost in thought while rummaging through the attic for an old family photo. That's when she stumbled upon a dusty box, revealing a picture tucked away, much like hidden dreams. Her heart trembled as she carefully lifted the photograph. It was a faded image of Richard's parents at a gathering with her own mother, a moment of history neither had known to exist. Shock coursed through her veins, an unexpected ripple sending her spiraling into a vortex of life-altering questions. Who was she truly? Part of a bond hidden for years, buried under the layers of wealth as insurmountable as a mountain range? Her mind raced. This revelation could change everything, yet brought along a tempest of fear. Would confronting Richard about their shared past alter the balance of their worlds or deepen the chasm? Tension hung heavy as shadows flickered on the walls. Time slipped away, and the answers lay just out of reach, tightening the grip of uncertainty around her heart. What would she do next? Would their lives intertwine in a way that would mend the pieces of her shattered reality? Or would she risk it all and fall deeper into a divide she might never escape? Maria continued to clutch the photograph, its faded edges creeping into her skin, a tangible connection to the past she never knew she had. Questions tumbled in her mind like the leaves outside, swirling, chaotic, yet captivating. What did this mean? Suddenly, her personal struggles intertwined with snatches of history, unveiling layers she had yet to unearth, both for herself and Richard. For so long, she had identified herself through the lens of hardship and sacrifice. Now, the possibility of shared lineage wove a different narrative into her identity. She was not merely the maid, the forgotten and overlooked worker who scrubbed floors under the glare of opulence. No, she could perhaps embody the essence of a lineage that echoed within the walls of this mansion. And this small sliver of history granted her an unprecedented power. Yet, alongside this burgeoning identity came the realization it was not enough. The photograph could not save her brother, nor could it transform her bank account. Time was fleeting. She needed a plan, a clear path that blended her newly discovered heritage with her ongoing quest for Nick's future. How could she leverage this connection, if at all? Maria paced the room, feeling the weight of the photograph pulling her down even as it lifted the corners of her mouth. First things first, she had to confront Richard. Gathering her courage, she envisioned how she would approach him. Would she mention the photo, or would she keep it secret, biding her time? Either way, the conversation had to happen, and soon. As dusk approached, she found Richard alone in the estate's garden, looking pensive against the backdrop of an extravagant sunset. The golden hues painted history they were tangling with, and toward the urgent reality of her brother's plight. His brow furrowed deeper, and for a fleeting moment she saw the gears of his mind turning vigorously, wrestling with not just the enormity of her request, but its implications on his own identity. Could he reconcile this shared history with his life of affluence, the very mantle that had perhaps sheltered him from the issues Maria faced daily? Why should I help? His question was blunt, but Maria could hear the underlying tremor. He was questioning not just her plea, but himself. "It's your family, too," she countered, surprised by the intensity of her own passion. "And this is not just about blood. I didn't come here to wield this photograph as a weapon. I came because I need your compassion." She watched as Richard's expression shifted slightly, the immovable billionaire facade cracking further. "Compassion," he echoed, as if tasting the word, weighing it against his own privileged existence. "You think it's that simple?" "And you think it's just about wealth?" she challenged, stepping closer, her spirit refusing to bend. "You wear your title like armor, but underneath we're both just human, trying to navigate a life filled with shadows from the past." For the first time, he seemed less like a fortress and more like a person, an intricate puzzle she had inadvertently begun to engage. His shoulders relaxed slightly, and in that moment she glimpsed the person beneath the polished surface, a young boy who had perhaps once questioned his place in the world, grappling with family and purpose. As the silence stretched again, here was a struggle that resonated more than just her own. It was the strife of humanity, the weight of choices looming over them both. For Maria, the photograph suddenly transformed into something more potent, not just a key to a shared family history, but a catalyst for change, a bridge spanning their disparate worlds. "Your choice matters," she added, her voice softening. "You can use this," she gestured towards the estate around them, "to impact someone's life for good. It's your legacy to build." The air thickened with possibilities, a pause filled with potential. Would he let go of the burdens of his past, the expectations of his wealth, to forge a new path with her? Richard inhaled deeply, a decision brewing behind his eyes. "Let me think," he finally replied, the weight of his contemplation evident. As he walked away, Maria felt the chaotic storm within her ease slightly, but the uncertainty remained. Despite this flicker of hope, doubt lingered uninvited, like the autumn leaves swaying in the winds, murmuring that this could just be another dead end. With each step back, a resolve formed. She wouldn't wait passively. She needed to be proactive, to continue weaving her newly discovered family narrative into tangible action. As she turned her thoughts to the next steps in her plan, the weight of the photograph pulsed with urgency in her pocket. This journey was only beginning, and she needed to explore every avenue that could help bring Nick the hope he desperately needed. Maria paused, scanning the opulent garden one last time. She felt a shift. A door in her life was opening, but she had to be ready to walk through it. Where would this path lead her? As she left the garden, thoughts swirling energetically in her mind, she felt the beginnings of a fiery determination. The next step was clear. She could not rely solely on Richard. She would have to engage deeper with her own history, embrace every piece of her newfound identity. Yet this was only a fragment of what lay ahead. The monumental challenge of confronting her own fears beckoned. Would she have the strength to delve deeper into her lineage and uncover more secrets that could change everything? The past might yet yield answers that could seal her brother's fate and illuminate her own future. Maria stepped out of the confines of the marble estate, the sun breaking through the clouds above her, illuminating her path. The vastness of the world around her felt both exhilarating and intimidating, as if each ray of light was a challenge beckoning her to embrace her own potential. She was acutely aware that this wasn't just about her brother anymore. It was about claiming her identity and her agency. Reflecting on her conversation with Richard, she felt a jolt of realization. It wasn't enough to simply demand his compassion. She had to nurture it, to cultivate an environment where they could both confront their shared past. But how? The answer eluded her, and yet it was whispered between the lines of her own story. She had already embarked on a self-discovery path. Now she needed to accelerate that journey, marshaling every lesson learned to aid Nick. Determined, she made her way through the garden, absorbing the beauty around her while a plan solidified in the back of her mind. Maria needed to understand the legacy she could claim, the family history waiting to be unearthed. It wouldn't just be about finding Nick, and perhaps Richard, but revealing who she was meant to become. Researching her family lineage would require her to dig into the recesses of her past, diving into what had been buried for too long. Her fingers brushed against the photograph in her pocket, a talisman of sorts. That single image summoned memories, not just of longing, but also of the strength it took to confront grief and possibility alike. The moment Maria returned home, she immersed herself in the task of tracing her roots. The warmth of her modest apartment couldn't mask the chilly reality of the task ahead. She turned her old laptop on and began scouring ancestry websites, poring over old family records, names, addresses, and dates. Each discovery pushed her further along the winding road of her own history. There was empowerment in reclaiming her heritage, a flare of defiance against the shadows that hovered. Hours turned into days, and as fatigue draped over her like a heavy blanket, Maria finally stumbled upon a trove of information, far more than she anticipated. A series of letters from a distant relative revealed secrets about her family, struggles, triumphs, the very essence of humanity that mirrored her own life's journey. This discovery wasn't just data. It was a roadmap leading back to her lineage, a legacy of resilience entwined with stories of care and sacrifice. Yet with every twist of ancestry uncovered, a nagging fear twisted in her gut. Would revealing this past benefit Nick or complicate matters further? She swayed between hope and trepidation, heart racing at the thought of not only reuniting with her brother, but also leveraging this newfound knowledge to bridge gaps. The stakes were undeniably high. This wasn't merely about history, but about securing a future. She realized then that she would need Richard's help not just emotionally, but logistically. He possessed resources, connections, and influence that could expedite her search. But how could she approach him again after their last encounter? She hesitated, the familiarity of her own doubts sneaking back in, tempting her to retreat into solitude. But she had come too far to step back now. Her instincts yelled at her to take risks, to confront fears rather than yield to them. Could she harness courage to initiate that next conversation with Richard, one that could intertwine their paths more distinctly? As she crafted the first few lines of a new message to him, Maria felt a surge of clarity. She wasn't merely an heir to a fortune. She was a force poised to redefine it. The gravity of her revelations weighed on her, a tumultuous heart pounding with purpose. To move this forward, she needed to be braver, bolder. The photograph in her pocket seemed to thrum with energy, urging her forward. What new connections would be strengthened through her discoveries? Would Richard step up, or would his fears eclipse the potential of a shared legacy altogether? With her fingers hovering over the keyboard, Maria breathed deeply, ready to uncover what awaited. The faces of her past were shifting, and they all whispered the same truth. It was time to put everything on the line. Maria hesitated for a moment, her finger poised over the send button, a collision of emotions surging within her. The weight of the message she had just typed felt monumental. Revisiting her brother's plight meant invoking the very conflict she had tried to navigate in her relationship with Richard. It was a dance of vulnerability and anticipation, and yet the possibility of leveraging their combined histories loomed large in her mind. The question remained, was she ready to dive into this unknown territory? Finally, she clicked send, and a rush of adrenaline coursed through her. The uncertainty was daunting, but it was also liberating. As the digital silence settled around her, Maria saw it as a moment of release, shedding the layer of doubt that had cloaked her. Hours passed slowly, each tick of the clock sounding heavier than the last. While waiting, she returned to her family research, each letter unveiling stories of her ancestors' tenacity. With every narrative, Maria's resolve crystallized. She belonged to a legacy of fighters, nurturers, and dreamers. They made sacrifices that shaped their community. She could do the same. The realization dawned. Her identity wasn't just intertwined with those who came before her, but also with the future she intended to forge. The rustling of her phone snapped her from her thoughts. It was a message from Richard. Her heart raced as she opened it. His response was thoughtful, but also wreathed in apprehension. He expressed a willingness to assist her search, but also cautioned her about opening old wounds. Some stories are better left untold, he had written, a sentiment that echoed her own internal fears. But as she read through his words, something ignited within her, a defiance to confront the ghosts instead of hiding from them. A reminder surfaced. Her journey was not just for Nick. It was a reclamation of herself and her past. She understood now that confronting the shadows wasn't about inciting pain. It was about fostering understanding and healing. The question she faced was how to guide this process with Richard, how to ensure their dialogue paved the way instead of creating walls between them. With newfound determination, Maria crafted a thoughtful reply, drawing carefully on shared experiences while weaving in her insights from the letter revelations. She invited Richard to join her in exploring their pasts, emphasizing how these stories could amplify their legacies and potentially mend their fractured family ties. The vulnerability she was offering felt risky, yet necessary. As she pressed send again, a sense of belonging washed over her. Soon after, the familiar contemplative silence enveloped her once more, both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. What if Richard accepted her invitation? Would he be ready, or would he retreat into his fortress of uncertainty? Days flowed into a haze, filled with anticipation and introspection, until finally Richard agreed to meet. The relief that washed over her was deeply accompanied by a sense of foreboding. As much as she longed for connection, she knew they were still fragile, bound by the unhealed wounds of history. The moment had arrived to confront not only Richard, but also the specter of their shared past. As Maria prepared for their meeting, she could feel the tension rise in her chest. This was more than simply a conversation. It was a leap towards redefining their realities, an opportunity for both of them to unravel their narratives and weave a new understanding together. The stakes pressed against her heart. A meeting filled with potential shifts lay ahead. Standing in front of the mirror, Maria steadied her breath. She knew that what transpired between them could alter everything. Would they emerge as allies seeking redemption, or would this be yet another chapter closed, irrevocably severing their paths? As she stepped out of her apartment, the world outside felt charged with possibilities. With every step, she could see the intertwining roads of their past and future ahead of her. What stories would unfold in that conversation? Would Richard's initial caution evolve into unity, or would old grievances overshadow new beginnings? The moment loomed before her, and the air crackled with the promise of revelation. Maria's heart raced as she arrived at the cafe, its familiar fragrance of roasted coffee beans enveloping her. Each step felt deliberate, yet the weight of uncertainty pressed down upon her shoulders. She pushed through the door, scanning the small space for Richard. Anxiety coursed through her veins, heightening her awareness of every ticking second. She spotted him sitting in the corner, a specter of their shared past. The lines on his face told stories of resilience and struggle, but today his demeanor exuded a mix of wariness and determination. As she approached, he raised his gaze, their eyes locking in a moment of unspoken recognition. This was the beginning of a reckoning. "Hey," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The words felt hesitant yet resolute. "Hey," Richard replied, his response softer than she expected. They shared a brief silence, both grappling with the weight of unaddressed issues. Maria felt the urge to launch into the topics that had driven her to reach out, yet she paused, unsure of his readiness to engage. Instead, she took a seat, feeling the calm that came from being present and the determination that propelled her forward. "Have you thought about our past?" Maria started, her words cautiously picking their way through the remnants of long-buried emotions. Richard nodded slowly, his expression shifting. "Every day," he admitted. "But some of those memories, they're hard to revisit." His acknowledgement ignited a spark within her. "I get it, but I need to understand. For my brother's sake, and for us. We're here now, and I don't want to let what happened between us shadow what could be." The flicker of vulnerability in her voice resonated with him, but he remained guarded. "You think talking about it will change anything? It's all so messy." "Messy is where growth happens," she countered, her resolve propelling her forward. She felt the urge to defend her position, to prove that confronting their past could lead to clarity. The conversation danced around their shared history, interspersed with moments of tension as old grievances emerged. Richard's apprehension was palpable. She observed him retreat behind his fortress of skepticism, holding on tightly to resentments that threatened to bar them from moving forward. "Maria, some wounds take time to heal," Richard finally said. "What if that time is now?" she replied, the sincerity in her voice vibrating in the air between them. "What if we could reshape our narrative together?" For a brief moment, Maria saw a flicker of hope cross his face, replaced quickly by doubt. The fortifications he had built around him, his heart were strong, but she sensed a crack in the armor. There was still a path forward, if only they could navigate the chaos together. In a rush of newfound courage, she dug deeper. What if we look at our past not as a burden, but as a means to understanding? Maybe the shadows that haunt us can transform into something we can use to rebuild. Richard shifted in his seat, visibly weighed by the possibilities Maria laid before him. "It's scary," he confessed. "What if we open Pandora's box and can't close it?" "Then we find a way to manage it," Together, she said, her voice unwavering. The certainty in her tone surprised even her. A moment of silence ensued, rich with a tension that felt both punishing and liberating. They were standing on the edge of an emotional precipice, daring to peer into each other's depths. "What do you really want, Maria?" Richard finally asked, his tone quieter, almost raw. "To understand, to heal. For us," she replied honestly. It felt like a declaration of intent, a personal commitment to reclaim what they had lost. The air shifted between them. Although the road ahead was laden with uncertainty, Maria felt the slight pull of a new narrative beginning to form. Their conversation had the potential to unearth hidden talents, strengths within themselves they had yet to discover. As they continued to talk, a budding clarity arose, revealing sisterhood and brotherhood intertwined with forgiveness and resolve. But deep down, Maria sensed the tension of Richard's remaining doubts. Would he take the plunge into their shared history, or would he retreat back into the shadows? A question hung in the balance, lingering like fog. Would this call for connection give birth to understanding, or would it shatter the fragile beginnings they were striving for? Maria's pulse quickened as she encountered the possibility of transformation, the moment teetering on the edge of revelation. What lay deeper within both of them that could turn their confrontation into a personal renaissance? The heat of the cafe seemed to intensify as silence enveloped Maria and Richard, each of them navigating the labyrinth of vulnerability and fear. Maria's mind raced, a cacophony of thoughts demanding clarity. She was determined to pierce through the thicket of hesitation. Every moment spent in indecision felt like a wasted opportunity. She shifted her weight, grounding herself in the reality they shared, reminding herself of her purpose. "I'm willing to face the truth, Richard," she said, her voice firm. "Not just for us, but for all the good that could be born from it." The words emerged like a lifeline, cast into turbulent waters, seeking connection. Richard didn't respond immediately, gazing into his coffee cup as if it were a crystal ball. He seemed to grapple with the implications of her statement, the weight of every moment spent avoiding the hard conversations pressing upon him. "Do you really think unearthing old mistakes will help?" he asked, his tone a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. The spark of hope she had seen moments earlier flickered again, but only barely. "I do," Maria replied. "Confronting our past is the first step toward healing. I want to know what truly happened between us, not just the surface details, but the core of it. The why behind our fallout is critical. It shapes who we are now." A muscle in Richard's jaw twitched, signaling the conflict lingering just beneath the surface. She sensed the turmoil within him, the tension between desire for understanding and the dread of reopening old wounds. "I don't want to keep going in circles," he finally admitted, frustration coloring his voice. "You've had the chance to move on, to build a life without me, and yet here we are, chasing ghosts instead of embracing what's ahead." Maria felt the sting of his words, recognizing the truth hidden in his frustration. Had she been holding on to the past, unable to fully step into her own future? She wrestled with the realization, acknowledging that her desire for answers was inextricably linked to her own need for growth. "But maybe that's the point," she said, softening her tone. "Maybe I haven't been able to move forward because pieces of us remain unresolved. I don't want the shadows of our past to dictate my future any longer." His eyes met hers, revealing layers of hurt and defiance that had clearly haunted him. "So, what now? We just dive into the ugly parts of our story like it's some kind of therapy session?" "It's more than that," she replied, allowing herself to breathe deeply. "It's an opportunity for us to discover what we've learned from our mistakes. What if opening this door allows us to redefine ourselves? Not just you and me, but everything we've built since." Richard's brow furrowed as he weighed her words. The flicker of vulnerability she had so desperately sought began to spark in his expression. He shifted in his seat, the wall he had built showing signs of weakening, the mortar between its bricks crumbling around their shared past. "What do you want me to say?" he asked, fighting against the emotional tide rising before him. "I want you to be honest," she urged. "What scared you the most about us? What do you regret? Let's bring it all into the light. Maybe we can discover something new together." A long pause followed, thick with tension, before Richard began to speak. "I was scared of losing you, of never being enough for you. Maybe, even more than that, I feared the pain I knew our relationship caused. The unresolved feelings you mentioned, they turned into a weight I couldn't carry." Maria absorbed his words, each one sparking her own memories of heartache. His honesty resonated deeply, sending her mind reeling with the reality of their shared trauma. In his confession, she found the roots of her own hesitations and failures. "Then we face it," she said, emboldened by the moment. "We can shed that weight, together." But as the words left her mouth, a shadow of doubt crept into her heart. Was this truly the moment of transformation they both craved? Or was it merely a prelude to more heartache? Determined to push onward, she leaned closer. "Let's dig deeper. Let's discover those hidden strengths we've both been keeping at bay." But just as intensity began to rise, a glimmer of apprehension clouded Richard's eyes, and Maria remembered their previous conversations often fell away like sand slipping through fingers. As the realization hit, Maria felt a deep-rooted fear. What if their attempt to confront the past unraveled everything they had held dear? Would they emerge stronger, or would the conversation fracture the fragile foundation they were attempting to rebuild? With an urge to hold the momentum, she added, "Are you ready to embrace this journey, Richard? Because it may lead us to revelations neither of us are prepared for." He hesitated, weighing their options while the specter of their history loomed large between them. The stakes were higher than she had anticipated, and a question lingered in the air. Would they rise together, or would they lose themselves in the fray of their shared past? Richard's hesitation felt like a door slowly creaking open, leading them into an unknown abyss. Maria could see the walls he had carefully erected begin to tremble, yet she understood that breaking those barriers would take more than just a single conversation. It would require an unwavering commitment from both, navigating a path strewn with sharp edges of their shared vulnerabilities. "Let's make a pact," she proposed, her voice steady yet vulnerable. "No matter how painful, we promise to be truthful and patient with each other." It was an affirmation, but also a challenge, a recognition that growth could only emerge from honesty. Richard nodded, albeit warily. "All right, but no, it won't be easy. I still carry so much fear over confronting those decisions we made." His eyes darkened a shade as he spoke, and she noticed the muscles in his jaw clenching. "Fear is natural," Maria reassured him, gently placing her hand over his. The warmth of that connection sparked a flicker of courage within her. It's what we do in those moments of fear that defines us. She felt the weight of his past press against her. Each moment they shared was layered with heartache, and she realized that acknowledging his pain might illuminate her own. "Remember when we went camping that summer?" Maria asked, her tone shifting to a softer note, hoping nostalgia could bridge the chasm of their past. "You sat by the fire, and I watched you throw the stones you found into the lake. Each one seemed to hold a secret you weren't willing to share." Richard's brow furrowed as the memory watched over him. "I thought burying those stones was the key to letting go." "Exactly," she pressed on, "but it only led to more weight accumulating on your shoulders. Like you were running away from something rather than facing it." "It was easier," he murmured, barely audible, as if the words carried an unbearable burden. "Easier isn't always better," she replied, emboldened by his admission. "Confronting the challenges is what helped me grow, and I believe it can do the same for you." The silence that followed was charged with possibility. In that moment, Maria realized this wasn't merely about restarting their relationship. It was about deliberately crafting a new identity for herself, one rooted in clarity and growth. She had spent too long dancing around her fears, both theirs and her own. "What if we took turns sharing?" Maria suggested, fully committed to the course of vulnerability. "Let's each reveal something we've hidden. Maybe that will help us understand each other better." Richard swallowed hard and acknowledged her proposal with a subtle nod. "Okay, I'll start." He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling as if he were preparing to scale a mountain. "I've always been terrified of being vulnerable. Relationships, I've felt like they make me weak. I built walls to prevent losing the people I love, because losing you felt like losing myself." Maria clenched her teeth, a wave of empathy crashing over her. "And what is it you think vulnerability really brings?" Richard hesitated just long enough for doubt to creep in. "I don't know. Maybe pain? Heartache? But what if it's the gateway to something beautiful? We can't show love or understanding without vulnerability," Maria countered, her passion igniting the conversation anew. "Have you ever thought that, in letting someone in, you're actually allowing them to see the strength you carry? It takes guts to face the fear of loss." He looked at her, an expression of contemplation dawning. "That's a different take, but I still don't know if I can handle it," he admitted, vulnerability overshadowed by apprehension yet again. In that moment, Maria felt her resolve crystallizing. This journey wasn't just a personal reclamation for Richard. It was a restoration of her own voice, too. "You don't have to handle it alone. We can navigate it together." Each unfolding revelation, though powerful, was tethered to the lingering question of their future. Would this be enough to bypass the shadows of their history? Could they truly rise to the challenge presented by their own hearts? The cafe was no longer a mere backdrop, but an arena for transformation. As the conversation grew deeper, every layer peeled back revealed not just their past, but also the uncharted potential of what might lie ahead. But doubt remained, whispering in the corners of her mind. What happens if we uncover truths neither of us wants to face? Richard's voice cut through her thoughts, carrying the weight of those fears she'd been wrestling with. "What if we rise?" she responded, her heart racing. "What if we tap into our strengths and discover a bond stronger than before?" His gaze held hers, the uncertainty dancing with the flicker. Possibility. The stakes were high, and the outcome was still veiled in mystery. Would they craft a new beginning, or remain shackled by their past? The tension in the air thickened once more, a potent reminder of the path ahead. Would they gain the courage to dismantle old fears, or would the shadows of yesterday continue to overshadow their tomorrows? Richard's hesitation lingered in the air like thick fog, each second stretching and pulsating with unspoken fears. Maria could sense the panic behind his stoic facade as he wrestled with the challenge she had laid before him. The pact they had agreed upon felt like a delicate bridge suspended over angry waters, and yet she believed it was a bridge worth crossing. "Let's not delay then," Richard finally said, his voice low and resolute, tinged with an anxious edge. "I'll go first." He shifted in his seat, as if preparing for a confession that would peel back layers she had never seen. "When we were together, I spent so much time worrying about what I would lose, what would break between us if I let myself be vulnerable. I thought if I stayed guarded, I could protect what we had. But every time I closed myself off, I ended up isolated instead." His words struck Maria like a physical blow. She recalled countless moments of frustration when he'd pushed her away, building walls that she couldn't scale. As she watched him grapple with his admission, a flicker of anger ignited inside her. But it was not directed at him. It was an anger at the situation that had led them here. "I understand that feeling," she replied, her voice layered with a conviction she didn't fully feel. But what you thought was protection was really just an excuse. You locked me out, and in doing so, you were locking yourself in. Richard looked at her, startled, then nodded slowly. I suppose I thought I was in control, but I was just lost. I've been afraid to confront how that fear transformed into anger. You don't have to conceal that fear any longer. Maria's heart raced, the urgency of their situation crystallizing into clarity. Accepting our emotions doesn't mean we're weak. It's an opening to understanding who we are. Richard rubbed the back of his neck, a habitual gesture she had seen countless times before when he was overwhelmed. You make it sound so easy, he countered, perhaps trying to regain a footing in the conversation. But every time I think about being open, I see the risks. You have risks in hiding too, Maria shot back, her resolve strengthening. You miss the chance of growth, the very essence of what we could create together. Richard fell silent, staring into his coffee cup as if it held the answer to an unasked question. Maria, sensing the weight of the moment, took a deep breath. She wanted to connect, to weave together their vulnerabilities, not to shatter them. Why don't you tell me? Something specific? Tell me about a moment that terrified you, and we can unpack it together. His eyes flitted up to meet hers, hesitating as though he stood at the edge of a precipice. Then, as if he were relinquishing a hidden treasure, he began, "The day we broke up. I convinced myself that was the right choice, but a part of me died that day too." The admission made her heart tremble, a visceral intimacy igniting in the air between them. What you thought was control felt like a loss to me too. You were supposed to be my partner, Richard, but you consciously decided to stand apart. God, this hurts. He leaned back in his chair, the weight of his realization a tangible burden. I thought distancing myself would allow me to breathe without the fear of suffocation, but in reality, I just broke my own heart. Each revelation reverberated through Maria, forcing her to confront how deeply their lives were intertwined. That's part of growth, isn't it? She reflected seriously. Facing the pain instead of running from it? The silence grew thick as they processed each other's words. It took a toll, exposing their scars, but there was an undeniable thread weaving them together, a shared understanding that reverberated beyond the confines of the cafe. Okay, let's both take responsibility for our past actions, Richard finally said. What if we lay everything on the table? What do you fear about me? What do you regret? The question hung poised in the air, laden with potential and tension. Maria's heart quickened, echoing her inner turmoil. This was the moment of truth, the catalyst for either rising up or succumbing to the weight of the past. With her pulse racing, she gathered her thoughts, pondering the hidden desires and unresolved grievances she had harbored. Could she brave this next step? Would vulnerability offer illumination or simply deepen their fractures? Then, I guess we'll find out together, she replied, her voice steadier. The ground beneath them had shifted, but not yet cracked. With Richard's steady gaze fixed upon her, she could feel the impending challenge looming, its edges sharp and demanding. Would they weather this storm of revelations and emerge stronger, or would the fabric of their relationship fray and unravel? The next moments were crucial, filled with anticipation and trepidation as they prepared to lift one another's veils. The path ahead remained shrouded, dangling precariously between hope and heartache. Maria stood at a crossroads, her heart pounding as she faced Richard, the weight of unspoken words pressing against the boundaries of their connection. Their shared histories wrapped around them like a familiar blanket, warm yet suffocating. The air between them crackled with the residual energy of their revelations, and they were now poised on the precipice of transformation. In that critical moment, fueled by newfound courage, Maria took a breath and leaned into the vulnerability she had cradled for so long. I regret not fighting harder. For us, she admitted, her voice low yet firm. When we split, I consigned myself to belief that it was meant to be, that there was no real chance left for us. I closed off, thinking it would shield me from pain, but it only led me to isolation. Richard's brows furrowed as he absorbed her words, the tension on his face slowly yielding to understanding. Isolation was an instinct I shared, he confessed, nodding slowly. I let fear dictate my choices. Fear of failure, fear of needing you, fear of losing myself in the process. My attempts to control the outcome only pushed us further apart. Eyes locked in a surreal exchange, it felt as though they were excavating their shared past together, uncovering layers of pain and miscommunication. Each revelation carved out space for empathy, pulling both of them closer, like iron filings to a magnet. I see it so clearly now, the mistakes we made, Maria continued, her resolve strengthening with every word. We were both broken, but failed to see that our strengths could counterbalance our weaknesses. Instead, our fear took hold. As those words hung in the air, Richard swallowed hard, a flicker of realization washing over him. That's the heart of this, isn't it? We let our fears dictate the narrative, and now we're trying to reclaim that story together. The quiet understanding resonated like an anthem, weaving through the cafe, surrounding them with a sense of purpose. With each admission, they transformed an atmosphere once heavy with regret into one imbued with hope and possibility. I want to be more than what we were, Richard, Maria said, her determination crystal clear. I want us to move forward, not just to revisit the past, but to build something stronger, rooted not in fear, but in the strength we discovered through our trials. Richard leaned forward, a new light in his eyes. If we can accept the ugly pieces of our past, maybe we can redirect them towards something beautiful. A flicker of resolve ignited within Maria. Right, we needed to face the shadows, those gaps of silence that became misunderstandings. But what if we took this chance to reshape our future? The shifting dynamics between them began to feel like the first stirrings of a renaissance, creating a space ripe for change and connection. In that moment, each of them was an architect of their destiny, potent agents in a narrative reshaping the very foundation of who they were. As the cafe bustled around them, they leaned into one another, ready to tackle the next phase of revelation. The stakes remained high, but this was the moment where Maria could feel the progress of their heated conversation blossoming into a foundation for a new legacy. Let's communicate openly about dreams and fears, about the paths we choose. Richard's resolve mirrored her own as he spoke. Everything left unaddressed has the potential to rise and pull us apart. There's strength in honesty, Maria replied, her heart swelling with a potent.
With Richard by her side, the future no longer felt daunting. It felt like a challenge ripe for collaboration and discovery. They were both ready to demolish the barriers that scared them, ready to become allies in pursuit of deeper understanding. As they left that cafe, Maria felt a sense of liberation flutter within her. The burdens of the past now stood as lessons, propelling their journey forward. Together, they carried the essence of shared identity, a powerful bond that could nurture resilience and growth. No longer just a maid lost in the shadows of luxury, Maria had found her voice, a voice filled with clarity, determination, and conviction. It echoed the strength she had forged in the crucible of heartache, now ready to embrace the dynamic future ahead. "I believe in us," she declared, glancing at Richard, who beamed with newfound confidence. It was a promise, a foundation upon which they would rebuild, armed with the truths they had unearthed together. Together, they stepped toward this uncharted territory, knowing that they could conquer whatever lay ahead. Each of them, transformed but securely anchored in who they were, had a destiny to manifest, and their ordinary histories would forge an extraordinary legacy. As Maria exited the cafe, she felt a wave of accomplishment wash over her. She had faced her fears, asserted her agency, and now stood on the threshold of a future laden with potential, a future she would grasp firmly, ready to shape it into something beautiful. Embrace this moment, this interim reawakening. Life can surprise you, but only if you're brave enough to take that leap. And now, dear audience, it's your turn to join this journey of transformation. You need to subscribe now to this channel if you don't want to miss the next exclusive emotional stories about facing fears and reclaiming identities. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm, ensuring that more stories of personal triumph reach those who need to hear them. Comment below with your thoughts on Maria's incredible journey and what you think will happen next. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who are on a path of personal growth. Don't wait even one more second to support this channel. It means the world to all of us in this community.